So we don't need to do the introduction because I recognize you guys from the last one. So yeah, I can just assume that you know everything that I typically say during the introduction. And plus, I can't remember what I have to say. So let me move the chat quickly. All right. So welcome, guys. Thank you for joining. I'm going to try and tailor this specifically to what you want to hear. And really, it can basically become like a conversation almost, where you ask me, someone who's a lot more experienced in the UCAT and not as much experience in the BMAT, but still has a good understanding of how it works. You can just ask me loads of questions, and I'll focus on giving you an introduction to the whole thing, especially for Caitlin, because yeah, I guess she's looking to do both, and she's in year 12. And so this is a good time to start thinking about the UCAT. So yeah, here's our socials as usual. Okay, so let me go to the first slide on my notes. What is the UCAT? So it's the test used by medical schools and dental schools to help determine, I guess, or differentiate between strong candidates and just all candidates in general. It tests your mental aptitude, your mental strength, your mental ability, and your professionalism as well through the various sections that it has. And it's a really good way to test it. It's efficient and it's quite reliable. Yeah, that's the same thing, but yeah, it's just pretty efficient. And they use that, well, they use it differently depending on each medical school or dental school, but it's a huge part of the application process, and it plays a massive role in determining whether you get an interview or not. Who was meant to take it? So if you're applying to dental school or medical school, you do the UCAT, depending on which university you're applying to. Why do universities need it? So it's kind of similar to what I said before about it being a test in which helps to determine the mental aptitude of each individual, as well as their ability to cope with stress, because it's a really stressful exam. How long is it going to be? It's 2 hours, and then it's scored between, you get a score of either 300, or it's scored between 300 and 900. And so your score will be somewhere between that. 300, I've never heard of anyone getting 300. 900, I've heard of people getting 900. 900 is, yeah, it's really rare, but some people can get 900 with a lot of practice. But the average score is like 650. I mean, the average varies quite a lot. Like for my year, I think the average was like it was 620. And at the time I'll go on to my UCAT experience later, but I personally didn't get the best UCAT score. At the time, I thought my UCAT score was absolutely horrible. But it was literally this morning that I saw the average for my year was like the lowest I'd ever been. And that was basically, my score was basically average. But yeah, the average fluctuates quite a bit. Sometimes 650 might be the average, sometimes it be 670. My year was 620. How is it? Oh, I've just done that. How do I register? So you just go on their website. Let me read this one out. Yes, it's a really simple registration process. Just go on their website, fill out a bunch of details, and it costs £75 to do the test. And then once you do all of that, you pick your testing center. So you'd sit the exam in a testing center. This is I don't know if any of you guys have done your driving test yet, but it's one of those places. And yeah, you just pick one of any of them, whichever is nearest to you. Yeah, answers those questions. Okay, so more about registration. So here are the key dates. So this would be important for you, Caitlin. So it opens, or wait, let me see, which one am I looking at? The first test is on July 26th, I think. Okay, yeah. So the first test is July 26th. And then the last one is like September 29th. That's for 2021. For my year, I think I did my UCAT on like October 2nd. I changed my UCAT date quite a few times because on the day I was meant to do it, I was feeling really, really ill. And I thought that if I sat the exam, I'd probably get 300 feeling the way I was feeling. And so, but again, I'll go into that with my experience later. But yeah, you've got between, late July to early October to sit your exam. And then you obviously get the results on the day you do it. And yeah, it's up to you to choose when you want to do that exam. Me personally, I think that if you did it in that July region, it would mean that you'd have to be preparing for the exam along with doing your year 12 exams, which are gonna give you your predicted grades. And so it'll be quite, this is just my opinion, I think I wouldn't want to do it around that time because I want to put all of my energy into preparing for my year 12 exams so I can get the best predicted grades possible and then spend the summer preparing for the UCAT. You need about 3 to 4 months of prep. People online, like I've received some really bad advice in which told me that I only needed like 4 weeks of preparation. That's not true. It depends entirely on the individual that you are and how well suited you are for these types of exams. The UCAT is a completely different ball game. Yeah, it's difficult, and like every exam you end up doing in your life is difficult, but it's not going to be like any exam you've done before, and it won't be like any exam you're going to do in the future. It's an aptitude test, which means it's basically just one extremely difficult puzzle that lasts 2 hours and is extremely time pressured. And if you're not someone who's familiar with these type of puzzle questions, and yeah, just puzzle questions, you need to get familiar with that. You can't approach it in the same way that you might approach your exams in school. And that's one thing that I definitely didn't understand. And I wish that someone had told me. Because with the UCAT, I wonder what's the next slide. Okay. With the UCAT, it's like, for me with school, anytime if I put the work in, I'd get the grades. But with the UCAT, it was like doing an exam in a different language. And that exam is obviously the hardest exam it could possibly be. And I jumped into that not knowing how to speak the language, and doing the hardest questions and wondering why I wasn't improving. But that clearly shows that in order to do well in the UCAT, you firstly have to understand the language. And that language is just a puzzle format of questions. And so you should get familiar with that. And I'll go on to that with like the tips with my tips and like things you can be doing to prepare. But in terms of getting familiar with puzzle questions, that just means like playing games on your phone. Games like, I saw a few online. Someone said like Sudoku, maybe 2048, those sorts of puzzle questions in which really just challenge the way in which you think, but doesn't require you to understand like the sciences or doesn't have essays and that sort of stuff. Yeah, let's go on to the next slide. So how do universities use the UCAT? They all use it differently. They obviously use your score only, and you get separate scores for each section. And did I go into the sections? Okay, I'll go into that later. But there are 3 ways. So I'll read it out. Candidates will be ranked by score and only the top scorers will be shortlisted. That's the first way. The second way is a cutoff score will be defined and you'll only be shortlisted if you meet this. And then a third way is scores will be viewed holistically alongside everything else that makes up your application. So yeah, the first one where candidates are ranked by their score, that obviously means the university will use or weight the UCAT really strongly in their application process. I'm pretty sure King's is like that. I'm not sure if they've said that word for word. Yeah, they've said that UCAT is the most important. I mean, for dentistry, I know that UCAT and King's. So with medicine and dentistry, it differs. But with dentistry for the UCAT, I'm pretty sure that they rank everybody. And only those with the highest UCAT score for King's can get an interview. And so those are the people that get 900, blah, 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 those sorts of scores. Yeah. A cutoff score. So I think, oh, someone's just joined. Caitlin. That's second Caitlin. Okay, so we have two Caitlins. So actually reading that back, I actually doubt that many universities will do that first one where they rank each individual, because the UCAT is different. It can be difficult for people if they just end up preparing for it in the wrong way. And it means you can lose, if they did that ranking method, you could lose a lot of really, I guess, potentially exceptional candidates if they perform poorly in that UCAT. And so I doubt that many universities will rank them by score. I think with King's, I should take that back. Maybe they just use the UCAT and just have that as a major part of the application process. You'll typically find that people who are getting interviews at King's have a higher UCAT score. So not necessarily 900, because barely anyone gets 900, but scores like 700, 680, those sorts of scores, relatively high. Those will be people that get the interview. But they'll obviously take into account other things like GCSEs and predicted grades. Cutoff scores, I think they used to do that. I doubt they do it anymore, once again, because it'd be quite unfair in terms of the application process, and you receive a bunch of candidates that are really similar. The point of the whole medicine application is to find a candidate who is all-rounded, or all exceptional all over, basically. And yeah, if you take all the UCAT students, you just do well, or all the students who do well in the UCAT, it's likely that there are going to be other areas in which they're not as exceptional or exceptional in. And so you want to just find someone who's perfectly all-rounded, basically. So yeah, most universities use that third one, where they look at all of the categories of the application, and then weight they'll like mark, they'll give them points basically based on every aspect of their application. And then they'll determine who to send to interview. They can then use your UCAT score. If you, for example, go to an interview and you get the same score as someone else, or like you've got two applicants, you don't know who to choose, they'll use things like your UCAT, your personal statement, and like your A-level grades to differentiate as to who they want to pick. But yeah. So what's the exam like? So here we go. You've got 5 sections, as you can see: verbal reasoning, decision-making, quantitative reasoning, and situational judgment. And the whole thing is really time pressured. So you can see that you always have more questions. Actually, no, for decision-making you don't, but for most of them, you have more questions. Technically, decision-making's got like multiple questions within a single question, but you have more questions than you do like time available. So it's not like 1 minute per question, it's like 30 seconds per question on most of them. It's really, really time pressured. But you do get used to it, I can say that. like from experience, it's overwhelming at first, but when you're in an exam, I feel like what carries me through that whole time pressure thing was the adrenaline rush of just doing the question and like wanting to get it right so bad that I forced myself to be quickly. I feel like I was carried mainly by adrenaline. And you might be able to relate to that when you like do your like papers or past papers in the future. So yeah. Oh, and then you've got the scoring on the side. So yeah, situational judgment is band 1 to band 4. Band 1 being the best and band 4 being the worst. If you're getting anything around band 3, that's pretty bad. Band 4s band 4 don't apply. Band 3 is extremely unlikely that you're going to get an offer. Band 2 is really, really good, and band 1 is even better. But yeah, situational judgment is like one of the really important ones. It like tests whether you're a good human, basically, or a good human. I say a good human in terms of your empathetic skills. And if you're making wrong decisions through simple questions like, oh, your colleague comes into work and they're drunk, do you ask them to leave? And you say, no, I'm going to let them stay there. That sort of thing is what leads to band 3 and band 4. But you want to be getting band 2, band 1. That's what universities look for. If you get band 3, they probably just don't consider your application straight up. So really make sure that you polish up on your situational judgment. Me personally, I don't think I've ever gotten band 3 or band 4 through all the papers that I did. But it should be pretty easy for you, situational judgment, especially if you really feel like you're meant for the profession. Okay, so here's some pictures. I'm happy I did this because with the UCAT, no one told me what it's gonna look like. Like they gave me a description, but I just pictured pure hell. I imagine the worst thing possible. It does look pretty bad, but this is what you'll look like. This is exactly what it's gonna look like on the exam day. They'll give you a cubicle. Mine was blue, just like that. They'll give you a computer, and mine looked exactly like that. Have headphones by you. It's a really old computer. They'll give you a whiteboard as well. So it's a big tip. Like while you're doing your practice papers, you should probably have a whiteboard with you with a marker pen and an eraser, or rubber, whatever. For me, the whiteboard they gave me, it was like laminated paper, and there was multiple sheets. It wasn't necessarily like a book, but it was just like multiple sheets of laminated paper, and they were joined together by like a single rope, and so you could like flip between each side. I'd recommend you try and get something similar to that, because when you're practicing, you want to simulate exam conditions as much as possible. And being familiar with writing on the laminated paper or just a whiteboard in general, it just makes it easier. You're a lot more comfortable when you're in the exam. I think I did that, and I remember in the exam, it was just easy having things coming to my mind and then looking at the paper and writing it down using a whiteboard pen. So yeah, my UCAT experience. Okay, so as I said, I felt like I got an average score, and I realized this morning. At the time, I thought I got, like for the past 3 years, I thought I got one of the worst scores ever. But I found out this morning, my score was just below average. But yeah, like my experience with the UCAT was not a good one. For me, the UCAT was the first time that I ever sat an exam and I didn't perform exceptionally. And it wasn't like, I've failed exams before, but that was when like you don't study for the exam properly and you could do better. This one, like I tried, there were so many sleepless nights, and yeah, I just didn't perform the way that I performed in all of my other exams before. And looking back is purely because this exam was so different. And, you know, it's like, I want to say it's a different genre, but how many genres are there to an exam? Like, it was like one big puzzle, and I was horrible at puzzles, and I approached it in a way. I approached it with the idea of, oh, if I study hard, I'll get a good grade, and that's not it. Um, you have to, as I said, learn the language, and then you can start studying hard. For me, I thought that, oh, with my like GCSEs, for example, or my A levels, um, I thought if I just sat down and did like, 10 hours a day, I'd be fine. And it worked with those subjects. But with UCAT, like, if you try and do more than 3 hours in a day, you're going to burn out. It is so exhausting. It completely pulls on every, I don't even know. Just completely like put so much stress on your brain. And I think that if I was doing something like 30 to 40 minutes a day for several months, I would have seen the progress that I wanted to see. But obviously, I had to learn the language first, and I didn't. So I went into the UCAT. I went for one UCAT workshop with Kaplan, and then I went for another one with Medic Mentor. The Kaplan book was the best thing I think you can get for the UCAT. I think you should get it, Caitlin. I think you should get it, Caitlin. And it's the reason why I don't need to go into as much detail with the tips for the UCAT, because that book will give you every single tip you can imagine. But yeah, I went for that Kaplan thing. The mentor was the person like hosting it was just one student like myself was hosting it to like 20 other people, and she got 900 in the UCAT. And she said that she did 4 weeks of revision. And that, like we did this workshop back in like July or June. And it's just like, yeah, I just did 4 weeks before and I got 900, nothing big, no big deal. And she really like bragged about it. And I thought, with the way that she described it, if she could get 4 weeks she could get 900 with 4 weeks of revision. I only wanted something like 700. I thought, okay, so that means 4 weeks of revision must be completely fine for me to do. 4 weeks is not enough. And I doubt that she actually did 4 weeks. Maybe she did 4 weeks of focused revision, and then like before she was just maybe doing like unproductive revision. But 4 weeks is definitely not enough. So I went in there with the idea of I'm going to do 4 weeks, and I spent the rest of my summer focusing on things like work experience and perfecting my personal statement and getting ready for A levels, year 13. And I think I booked it for like September, very late, like September 28th. And yeah, so I was meant to start my revision like around the time when I started school, which was a very bad idea. Balancing school and revision, year 13 came at me like a truck. It was a big step up, and at the same time with all of that, I was having to balance doing the UCAT after school after doing going to school from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. I come home and I'll have to do that UCAT, and it was exhausting. So yeah, there was that exhausting aspect. The most frustrating bit, so initially what was scary was the fact that I wasn't making progress in the way that I would normally make progress with any other subject. I'd start off, I'd do like an hour, or maybe not an hour, like 3-4 hours of revision. And I was getting 400s with every paper I did. And no one told me that it's completely normal to get 400 when you're first doing the papers. But I was thinking like, I'm getting 400. This isn't good. And I thought like I was supposed to be getting like maybe 600 on my first attempt. But no, I was getting 400. And so overall, I wasn't seeing progress. And as I wasn't seeing progress, I began to become a lot more anxious with that exam. So yeah, I would have spent that first week doing papers. I didn't see any progress. That's 1 week gone, and I only have 3 weeks now. And now I'm thinking, okay, I've just spent 1 entire week doing papers. I've averaged a score of 400, and now I only have 3 weeks. And so in that second week, I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to completely cram. And I did. I tried cramming. My score went up from like 400 to 500. Did improve, but didn't improve in the way that I thought I was supposed to. I didn't know how I was supposed to get from 500 to something like 800, 700 that quickly. The next week goes from 500 to like 500 again. It was fluctuating. I wasn't seeing progress. And basically I ended up with like 1 week left. And I was still getting like 500s in my UCAT. And so, yeah, the whole thing became very stressful. I changed the date for my UCAT by like for maybe, I think it was like a week or something like that. I moved to like October 2nd. And I carried on practicing. I was still averaging score. I mean, every once in a while I get a score like 670, but overall my average was like 540. And then obviously the day came and I was very nervous, incredibly nervous. I've never felt so anxious before to sit an exam. And I ended up on that day, I think I was really nervous to the point where I felt like I couldn't sit the exam. And so I moved the date again by 2 days. I got an extra 2 days for revision. I did like over 10 hours worth of papers. And I actually did pretty good in those papers. Like at that point, I was consistently getting scores like 640, 630, and sometimes getting scores like 700. But it was inconsistent. And the inconsistency was what was making me so anxious, because with my other exams, as I would get closer to the exam, I would start seeing, I'll just get a lot more consistent with seeing like high grades and stuff like that. But I wasn't seeing that with the UCAT. And so I'm like, okay, let's just pray that on the day I get the 670. On the day I did the exam, I'd moved it before. I thought it went really well actually, but it didn't. I ended up getting 615 for my score, and the average was 620. I thought the average was like 660, but the average was 620. So I actually did just about average. And it turns out everybody was getting relatively low scores that year. But yeah, it was a shock to me because I thought I did horrible. And looking back, I realized that if I'd focused on learning the language of just answering puzzle questions and becoming comfortable with that first, I would have seen the same progress that I saw in my other subjects, which are more like essay-based and knowledge-based. But yeah, so for me, the big lesson looking back on all of that was to give myself more time, to not try and do multiple hours of revision every day, because that leads to burnout. Because one thing that happened to me after doing that UCAT was my grades at school dropped because I was completely burnt out. I couldn't do any work at school. And so, yeah, that led to burnout, and I had to pick myself up later down the line, which was even more tiring, but I ended up doing it. But yeah, like, just don't make the mistake that I did in thinking that you can get it done in 4 weeks, because that's not true. You need multiple months of practice, consistent practice, just a few minutes every day. Firstly, I'd say maybe around January time for you, Caitlin, start familiarizing yourself with those apps, where those puzzle games, stuff like that, familiarize yourself with it if you're not already familiar with like doing puzzles. And then like around March, April, maybe introduce yourself to practice questions, and I'll show you the resource for that. But yeah, in summary, give yourself lots of time and do a really small amount every single day, and learn the language of puzzle games. That was what definitely led to my fatal score. Yeah. I say my score was fatal. It wasn't fatal. I still got 3 interviews, but yeah, I felt like I could have done better if I'd taken a different approach to the exam. So how to prepare for it? So I've got 3 resources or 3 things that I loved during my preparation or during my process of preparing. This is what everyone uses, it's Medify. Everybody uses Medify. They've got the most questions on there, and it's really similar. It was exactly the same difficulty. Some people say otherwise. For me, it was exactly the same difficulty as the exam that I did. It's got multiple full-length papers, and then they've got like thousands of questions for each section. So Medify is what you want to be using when I say doing 30 minutes a day from like April onwards. You want to be using Medify and focusing on your weaker sections of the UCAT. Maybe like twice a week, do a full 2-hour paper and allow yourself the breathing. Like, don't put any pressure on yourself to get like a high score, or don't think of the long-term goal, basically, because you're going to get 400 or 300 on your first few attempts. You're gonna. And I wish someone told me that, because when I was watching videos to prepare for this stuff, everyone was saying like, oh, just accept the fact you're going to get 400s in your first few goes at this. So yeah, you will get those scores. Embrace it. Like, it will get better with more and more practice, and you have multiple months to improve. Unlike myself, where I saw that I was getting 400, and I realized, oh my God, I've only got 20 something days to move this up to 750, which I wanted. So yeah, so that's what you use for practice questions. Kaplan, you want to buy Kaplan's book, because they're going to give you all the tips, every single tip you can ever think of. I say, even if you can think of every tip that could possibly be a tip for the exam is in that book. And that book is so underrated. Definitely the best thing ever. I feel like it's the only reason why I could get the score that I got, even though I didn't appreciate the raw structure of the exam and I just went into it blind, just doing loads of UCAT scores. And one thing I read as well when preparing for this was that a lot of people made that same mistake, in that they went into the UCAT just doing tons of practice questions expecting to improve. And yeah, so Kaplan is the best way to give you a completely detailed understanding of the UCAT, and you can work in whatever pace you want. One thing I don't like about Medify is that they've just got tons of videos, specifically like 72 hours of videos. Like, no one's going to watch that, and the videos are really boring as well. The textbook is really fun. People say that when you're preparing, you should always prepare online. I'd say when you're initially preparing in that January, February phase, you want to be using paper, and Kaplan's on paper. So yeah, use Kaplan for like the first few months and make notes on every section. So I've got there. This guy, I don't know, you've probably heard of Karma Medic, you guys. That's his notes for the UCAT. He made notes on every section. I did the same, but I've thrown my book away. That making notes was, yeah, again, the best thing for me. Summarizing all the tips that I felt was going to help me the most on the day of the exam. And it definitely did, because when I would see those questions, I would remember, okay, when I felt that pressure, I would remember all the tips I was giving myself. So yeah, definitely do that. Summarize everything onto one sheet. And then like by the end, when you're like coming towards your exam, it will be a really detailed sheet for each section. So yeah, anything else? Oh, it's quite a lot. Okay, so those are the 3 basically resources, or those are the 2 resources that you should be using, in my opinion. And then with the UCAT, so then obviously make your notes on all the tips that you get from the Kaplan guide. But so then onto the other notes I've made, I said you should develop the habit of studying for 30 minutes to 40 minutes a day. When you're doing that studying, that 30 minutes a day, you want to be focusing on doing just light questions, basically refining your ability on each section. For me, I didn't do that. I was doing full 2-hour papers every day. And again, that contributed to things like burnout. Focus on improving your skills and not just your UCAT score. So that goes back to me saying, using those puzzle apps and stuff like that. Okay, I've got a few. So, I said Sudoku. There's an app called Peak. You've got the Mensa IQ test, which is a great way to, I guess, prepare you for that. Mensa's definitely got a lot more resources than the UCAT would. And, another important tip. Where is it? Increase the difficulty slowly. You're going to be a novice when you start this. One of my big mistakes is that I jumped into this and went straight to the hardest difficulty, which was the full paper. The UCAT, in terms of like these puzzle type exams, or specifically we'd call them an aptitude test, the UCAT is the hardest of the hardest type of those types of exams. It doesn't get harder than the UCAT. And the combination of intellect that's needed as well as time pressure, it creates a really, really disgusting exam. And when you force yourself into that exam with absolutely no understanding or skill of that type of exam, it's just overwhelming. And you don't want that to be the case. So increase the difficulty. That's why I said start with Kaplan, because Medify doesn't have any easy questions. They put you straight into the hard questions, or start with playing the apps and then work your way to Kaplan or reading the book for Kaplan. And then, gradually find your way into doing questions for Medify. Another tip, so I hope you guys are like writing this stuff down. Pick the correct date. So I personally recommend giving yourself the entire summer to prepare, and giving yourself the free time to get predicted grades that are really, really good. Because if I didn't do that, then I feel like that would leave one side of my application that wasn't strong. So that side of my application won't be strong. Create a strict revision schedule. So 30 to 40 minutes a day with 2 full papers or 1 full paper a week for the first few months, or the first 2 months. And then in the final month, you could be doing like a paper every other day, or I think that's okay, a paper every other day. But just gradually increase the difficulty for this a really hard exam. Okay, verbal reasoning. Damn, this is going a tiny bit faster than I wanted it to. Verbal reasoning. So this is one of the sections. This is the first section of the UCAT. People find this the hardest section, I think. Most people say it's the hardest section. And as a result of that, a lot of anxiety can come when you start the exam, because you start with what is, for most people, their worst topic. There are a lot of things here. The most important thing is learning how to skim read, or scan, we say. You don't read the text first. You read the question and then you scan the text and try and answer the question. For people who are when I say for people, I mean, you get better at this with practice, and I definitely did. And if I gave myself more time, I definitely would have become a lot more consistent, because towards the end, it became easy reading and answering these questions within 30 seconds. I think it's specifically 28 seconds per second, per 28 seconds per question. So it's a lot. It's like very little time, and it's very pressured, but you get used to that pressure eventually. I'd say you start off without any time pressure, trying to focus on answering the questions just like within your head, to understand the format, and then working to that time pressure. like say maybe starting off with no time, then working to 50 seconds per question, and then increasing that or decreasing that to 30 seconds per question. What else? So there's multiple types of questions. So you've got true, false, can't tell, and then you've got free text questions like this one. But the average score for this section is, wow, 570. Damn. In the year that I did it, it was the lowest that it had ever been. I guess we just had a really hard paper. Also, yeah, that was one thing I didn't know. I thought everybody gets a different paper, but no, everybody gets the same paper. I don't know why I thought that, but yeah, so that means when you sit like your UCAT, you can go on the student room and see what other people are saying about the paper. So people might be saying, oh, the paper is so much harder than what's on Medify this year. Or they might be saying, oh, watch out for verbal reasoning. That was the worst thing ever. Or they might say, oh, quantitative reasoning was really easy this year. You can look at stuff like that just to get an understanding of the difficulty of the paper. But yeah, for my year, it was 565. For other years, it's normally above 570. Yeah, I can't remember what I got on that score. I think I got like 570 something. So yeah, speed reading. I've gone over the main tips. Obviously, Kaplan's going to go into a lot more detail than I ever could with the time that we had. But do you want to try and answer this question, you guys? Yeah, have a go at answering this question. So obviously start with reading the text and then, sorry, not reading the text, reading the question, and then skim read the text so you can get an answer. So in this case, obviously read the question and then look at all the statements that they give you and like do it one or by trial and error, essentially, with these types of questions. So I'll give you like 2 minutes, I guess, to try and answer this, or a minute to try and, it should be quick. I'll give you a minute to try and answer this and then put what you think the answer is in the chat. Or actually, no, just answer in your head. I won't bait you out if you get it wrong because it can be embarrassing. Yeah, I'll give you a minute. Okay, I've got my answer. I think it's been a minute already. Wow. So if you said A, then you got it right. So one thing that these, as you'll practice with the UCAT, you'll notice you'll begin to like form tips for yourself. So obviously you've got all the tips in the book and you should like form that as, allow that to form your base in terms of your understanding of the section that you're being assessed on. But then you're going to learn stuff yourself that are just tailored for your understanding. For me, one thing I noticed every time I do these questions, especially the statements ones, is that it's almost like the statements are in reverse. And so I can't read the text expecting to find that exact statement. But I just have to read the text and find something that brings or has the same context as that statement. So looking at strength of nylon in comparison to propylene is what I'd be focused on when I'm looking through the text. And I skim through it in a zigzag fashion. I'm pretty fast at skim reading. And I saw on the second bullet point, it says propylene is not as strong as nylon. And so that means A is correct. So as I said, I did a trial and error method, started with A. Nylon is stronger than propylene, which is stronger than hemp. And then I looked through the text to see whether that statement is right. And it was right. So I choose A and then I move on to the next question. So yeah, there is the explanation. So obviously don't check the other ones as soon as you get your correct answer. And there's another one. I'm not going to do this one. I want to save time. I'll quickly say this. If you feel like you read through all four of them, oh wait, what was I going to say? Read through all four of them and you feel like you don't get an answer. Okay, yeah. So if you feel like you've tried all four of them and you can't find an answer, that just means you have to try again. You're going to get better at it with time, being able to pick a right answer. But if you read through all four and you feel like you don't get the right answer, you don't have a single answer which you feel is correct, when you're practicing, try again. If you feel like you can still do it within 30 seconds, if not, just pick an answer and move on. So we use the word triage. That means prioritize something else and just pick an answer and move on and then come back to it if you have time at the end. Because you obviously you might come into another question which is really easy that you can get the marks on. The Kaplan book goes into quite a lot of detail with triaging. So, okay, decision making. Okay, so I'm going to read this out from my notes. Decision making requires you to use logic and reasoning to solve textual and visual data related questions. It requires you to solve questions that have corresponding text or visual data. There are 29 questions that need to be answered in 31 minutes. But as you can see, it's not like a single question. You've got multiple statements that you have to read. So it's not necessarily like 1 minute per question. I guess for each page, you could say, let me get, what is it exactly? Yeah, so for each page, it's around 1 minute for each page, but obviously they're like multiple statements that you have to read, so you have to be quick. When you're doing the exam, it does have a timer at the top, and so you can count or just see how well you're doing in terms of every question. But have a go at this question. I'll give you 2 minutes to do it. Actually, you've got quite a bit of time. I might go back to that other question and show you what the time pressure feels like. But yeah, carry on with this question. Okay, like 30 seconds. Okay, it's been 30 seconds. So if you said yes, no, yes, yes, no, then you got it right. Oh, okay. Christina's got an interview. All right. Bye, Christina. So I guess it's just me in UK then. Wow. But yeah, if you said yes, yes, no, um, sorry, yes, no, yes, yes, no, then you would have got that right. So onto quantitative reasoning. So I'll go over this quickly then, since it's just you now. So quantitative reasoning is just a maths one. If you do maths A level, then you should be pretty good with quantitative reasoning. All that you have there, or the only thing that's there, or that makes it different to maths A levels, the time pressure. So these are like GCSE style questions, or maybe even Key Stage 3 in some of them. But it's just time pressure, and you have to focus on just being as fast as possible and working out those questions. So you have a calculator on the screen that you'll use, and you also have your whiteboard. And so when working out questions like this, you'll just like, I guess, do the simple maths there using your whiteboard and the calculator that they give you on screen and trying to answer the question within the time. You have around roughly 40 seconds per question, and there are 36 questions overall. So that's quantitative reasoning. Abstract reasoning, this is the one that I feel like makes the UCAT the UCAT. It's like, yeah, it's like the craziest one. It can be difficult at first. For me, it was so difficult at first, but it became really, really easy towards the end. And I think it was probably my favorite of all of them towards the end, because it felt like you had so much breathing space. With abstract reasoning, there are 55 multiple choice questions and you have 13 minutes to answer it. With abstract reasoning, it's like, I'm not sure what it is, but it'll be difficult to choose how many seconds per question. I think it's maybe like 20 seconds. But you basically fall into a rhythm of recognizing these patterns. And yeah, you just have to recognize the pattern and choose what set either one of those would fit into. So in this case, if we looked at this, I mean, you could try it. I'll give you 2 minutes to try it. But imagine in an exam, you'd only have 20 seconds to recognize the pattern. But yeah, if I give you 2 minutes to try, then I'll say the answer. Okay, I'm gonna say that's time. So for this kind of question, I would honestly skip this in the test and just pick one that I felt it should go in. But the answer was A. So this is the pattern. In set A, there are 5 squares in a diagonal. If there is a black circle to the right of the square, then the next square down the diagonal line is the previous square rotated by 90 degrees. In set B, there are 5 squares in a diagonal. If there is a black circle to the right of the square, then the next square down the diagonal is the previous square rotated by 90 degrees anti-clockwise. So so one thing about abstract reasoning is that there are going to be some patterns in which you just cannot recognize within 20 seconds. And that's part of the test, being able to accept the fact that you can't answer that question and move on and triage the other ones that are a bit more important. So in this case, you just pick either one, in my opinion, and you definitely want to try and answer it or recognize the pattern. Give yourself 20 seconds. If you see nothing, move on. There'll be questions where you do clearly see a pattern. Okay, situational judgment. So this is the really easy one. It's quite straightforward. Given a situation and you pick the answer. I didn't have to do much preparation for this. But yeah, you have 70 seconds per scenario. So within each scenario, you have multiple questions and overall 23 seconds per question. So you'd read the scenario in your first, like when you first see it, and then you take the time to answer the remainder of the questions. So if you have a go at this, I'll give you a minute. Actually, it should be pretty quick. I've got my answer. So if you said very important, then that is correct. Okay, so I'm gonna skip this one. The BMAT. Okay, so the BMAT, let me get up my BMAT notes. Okay, so the BMAT is, oh, I think you just left. Okay, there are two Caitlins in the call. The BMAT is the science, basically the sciencey one. It's the complete, basically opposite of the UCAT in that it's not an aptitude. Oh yeah, that's fine. It says it's not an aptitude test in the same way. And so it's focused more on the more, I guess, normal exam principles that you'd find. It's like, if I was to best describe it, it's like a GCSE subject. And you have to prepare for an entirely new subject, but it's just got a lot less content and you prepare for it in that way. When do you sit it? So there's one date for sitting it. This year it's November the 3rd. So yeah, you'd be sitting next year. So I'm not sure what that date would be, but it's typically 1 or 2 dates overall. And with the BMAT, what differs from the BMAT in terms of the UCAT is that you only get your scores after you sit the paper. So like, oh, okay. I'm assuming you disconnected again. I'll just quickly summarize this. It should take like 5 minutes for the BMAT. But yeah, so you get your scores after you do the exam, like I think a few weeks after. Okay, so you do the exam on the 3rd of November and you get the score 26th of November. And so basically you're sitting the exam blind and you're applying to university blind. I mean, you would have already sent off your application on October the 15th. And so if you're planning to apply to universities like these ones above, so Brighton, Imperial, Lancaster, UCL, Cambridge, Leeds, or Oxford, one of those, you'd have to take the BMAT, but you'd be, again, sitting your exams blind. So unlike with the UCAT, you can't get your score, see that, oh, I did really well, so I'm going to pick all the universities that focus highly on the UCAT. You'd have to yeah, you just have to apply blind and just pray that you get the right score. With the BMAT, that means you have to do a lot more preparation for it. I've been told 4 to 6 months of prep is what you need. But yeah, so how much does it cost? What did I do that? £92 to sit the BMAT, and then if you register late, you have to pay an extra £34. How important is my score? So your score is really, really important with the BMAT. As I said, the BMAT is much more of the science exam. With the BMAT, what makes it stand out to be a difficult exam is the fact that you've got an essay at the end, and your, I guess, examiners or the admissions tutors, they will read your essays and basically just get an understanding of how well you write. But that essay is really time pressured, and it can be on any topic that they choose. I think it's normally biology based. But yeah, there's that aspect of it which can be quite difficult. The BMAT also requires you to relearn some of your GCSE subjects. So your GCSE science, you have to relearn specifically GCSE physics if you're not doing at A level. But yeah, it has the whole specification like an exam, and it means that you can prepare for it like a normal exam. I feel like I would have preferred the BMAT, and if I were applying for med, I definitely would have done the BMAT entirely and not sat the UCAT at all, because the BMAT is my kind of exam. It's the kind of exam where if you learn, it's just straightforward and like all the other exams I've done before. And it wouldn't have required me to do as much work as I would have needed to for the UCAT. Okay, so these are the Bmi Universities. There is one for dentistry, which is Leeds. So all the other dentistry ones are UCAT, except for Leeds. But yeah, and then you can see the way that they use the BMAT each, in this case, just these 4 universities. So Imperial, Cambridge, and Oxford. Imperial has a cutoff. Wow. In terms of scores, you get a score of something that's between 5 and 9. No, I think it's either 1 to 9 or 5 to 9. Let me check. But on average, the students will be getting a score between 5 and 9. If you get a 5, that means you're, I think I've got this on the next slide. Yeah, if you get a 5, that means Cambridge University would define you as someone who's academically very able. But some students will get 6s, some students will get even higher than 7. And obviously, getting higher than 7 is where it gets difficult. Yeah, how to prep for the BMAT. So I've listed these 3 resources. Obviously, Kaplan. BMAT Ninja is the website that I know everybody uses for it. And then Ali Abdal's got an amazing set of videos to help you prepare for the BMAT. Yeah, so I guess everything for the BMAT. Do you have any questions before we close? Your mic is on, but if you want to put it in the chat, you can. All right, okay. I hope this gave you a good introduction to the BMAT and the UCAT, and hopefully you just get the resources I basically gave and use all those resources to help you when you go on to prepare for it. But yeah, for the BMAT, definitely focus on doing a lot more, or a longer term, I guess, revision over a longer period of time, because you need a lot more prep for the BMAT than you do for the UCAT. So yeah, thank you for attending then. I guess you can go. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. I can't believe that many people didn't turn up for the UCAT one, but there are a lot of people for the interviews, so it should be more. But yeah, bye then.